2 million years ago, your direct ancestor was basically an ape. Small brain, huge gut. Spent half its waking life just chewing. It slept in trees, it couldn't handle the cold, and if you stood it next to a modern human today, the differences would be obvious in seconds. You wouldn't invite it to dinner, you would call animal control. Then one thing changed. It didn't just change what they ate. It rewired their entire body, forced them out of the canopy, and physically built the organ you are using to process and understand these exact words right now. This is the story of how a campfire built the human brain. To understand how revolutionary this shift was, you have to rewind 2.5 million years to a group of early hominids known as Australopithecus. They were short, stocky, with long arms perfectly built for climbing, and a brain that was roughly a third the size of yours. They spent their days foraging for whatever raw food they could find. We aren't talking about ripe orchard apples. We are talking about tough, woody roots, deeply fibrous plants, and the occasional scrapped remains of a carcass left behind by actual apex predators. And almost none of it was easy to eat. Raw food is absolutely brutal on a body. Unlike a hot, cooked meal, raw plant fiber and raw animal protein are locked up fast. They are wrapped in tough cellular walls and dense connective tissues. Your digestive system has to break all of that down entirely on its own, using nothing but mechanical chewing, strong stomach acid, and a massive amount of time. So, evolution built the biological tools for the job. Our ancestors had huge flat molars specifically designed for grinding. They had massive jaw muscles anchored to a skull that was shaped almost like a helmet just to support the biting force. And they possessed a long, complicated gut, much closer to what you would see inside a modern gorilla than a modern human. That gut was a massive fermentation vat, capable of slowly rotting and breaking down tough plant matter for hours at a stretch. It worked. It kept them alive. But it was incredibly expensive. Some anthropologists estimate that early hominids spent up to 6 hours a day doing nothing but chewing. Imagine your entire morning and half your afternoon dedicated to aggressively grinding your teeth against fibrous roots just to survive until tomorrow. And the physical act of digestion itself burns a massive amount of calories. A body that is constantly grinding and fermenting raw, low-yield food does not have any surplus energy left over for anything else, including, critically, a larger brain. In the economy of human biology, there is a concept known as the expensive tissue hypothesis. It points out a fundamental problem. Brain tissue is metabolically ravenous. It is the most expensive real estate in your body. Even right now, as you sit completely still watching this video, your brain is burning through roughly a fifth of your body's entire daily energy budget just to keep the lights on. For an early hominid surviving strictly on raw food, affording an organ like that was biologically impossible. If a random mutation gave an Australopithecus a slightly larger brain, that creature would likely starve to death because it simply couldn't chew enough raw food in a 24-hour period to feed it. The mathematical energy limits of raw food had put a hard ceiling on our evolution. Then, starting around 2 million years ago, the fossil record throws a massive, unexplainable curveball. Suddenly, brains start getting visibly bigger. Not just a gradual shift, but a clear, explosive upward jump. Bodies get taller, leaner and more upright. But here is the massive evolutionary puzzle. At the exact same time the brain is getting larger, guts get significantly smaller, teeth shrink, jaw muscles shrink. The heavy brow ridges and helmet-like skulls soften. This is the emergence of Homo erectus, the first of our ancestors that actually looked human-shaped. On their own, none of these biological changes make sense together. A shrinking digestive system means you have less capacity to extract energy from food. So how in the world do you grow a massive, incredibly expensive brain at the exact same moment your stomach and intestines are losing their capacity to digest? Something had to be delivering dramatically more calories, and it had to do it for dramatically less physical cost. The energy ceiling had to be broken, and the leading candidate for that breakthrough is fire. For millions of years, fire was just a terrifying force of nature. A lightning strike on the dry savanna would spark a blaze, and every animal with a survival instinct would run. But at some point, one of our ancestors didn't run. Maybe they realized that moving through the ashes of a bushfire left behind roasted seeds, toasted nuts, and the tragically slow animals that couldn't outrun the flames. And they realized that this burnt food tasted better, and was incredibly soft. Eventually we learned to harness it. And the moment we did, we outsourced our digestion to the flames. Heat does chemically exactly what teeth and stomach acid used to have to do the hard way. When you cook a tuber or a piece of meat, the heat weakens the tough cellular walls. It gelatinizes starches, turning them into a biological slurry that your body can instantly absorb. It denatures proteins, literally unwinding their tightly coiled molecular structures into loose strands that your digestive enzymes can easily snip apart. Cooking even neutralizes certain natural plant toxins, suddenly unlocking massive new food sources that were previously poisonous to eat raw. Researchers have actually tested this theory directly in the lab. Animals were fed identical diets. The exact same meat, the exact same starchy vegetables. One group got it raw, the other group got it cooked. Then they measured the actual caloric energy the animals absorbed. Across the board, cooked food won by a massive margin. It was the exact same food, weighing the exact same amount, but cooking it magically unlocked meaningfully more usable energy. That difference compounded fast. Suddenly our ancestors were spending a fraction of the time chewing. Their bodies didn't need to burn thousands of calories a day just digesting. The gut didn't need to be massive anymore, so it shrank. And all of that deeply valuable, newly freed up biological energy had to go somewhere. The evolutionary floodgates opened, and that surplus energy went straight into growing the cerebral cortex. But the invention of the campfire didn't just rebuild our anatomy. It completely restructured our society and our daily lives. Before fire, the setting sun dictated everything. When it got dark, you climbed a tree, tried to stay quiet, and tried not to get eaten by a leopard. But with a roaring fire, the night was suddenly pushed back. Ground-dwelling predators were terrified of the flames, which meant for the very first time, our ancestors could safely sleep on the ground. Some researchers argue that this shift away from tree sleeping is what finally reinforced permanent, upright walking, because maintaining a body built for climbing was no longer a matter of life and death. More importantly, fire created the concept of free time. With chewing reduced from 6 hours a day to just 1 or 2, and the night illuminated by the hearth, early humans had hours of extra time every single day. What do you do when you are sitting around a warm fire, totally safe from the dark, with a full stomach of easily digested food? You look at the others across the flames. You communicate. You build better tools. You pass down knowledge. Sitting around a fire at night, after dark, was very likely the first regular social gathering in human history. It demanded social cooperation. You had to gather wood, tend the flame, and share the cooked food. The campfire was the incubator for complex human culture, language, and shared myths. Now the physical evidence for all of this isn't just theoretical. Fire residue sites have been found deep in caves in Africa dating back roughly 1 million years or more. Burnt flint tools and charred bones have been found alongside early human remains, suggesting fire use stretching back hundreds of thousands of years across multiple continents. Fire wasn't a single lightning bolt invention by one genius caveman. It was a slowly adopted technology that spread, deepened, and became permanently intertwined with our survival over enormous stretches of time. But here is the honest, scientific catch. Not every single researcher agrees that cooking hot meals was the original reason we tamed fire. While the cooking hypothesis explains the brain-gut trade-off perfectly, Some anthropologists argue that the earliest, most consistent use of fire was actually for smoking and preserving meat, and keeping massive predators away from a fresh kill. Their reasoning comes down to biological accounting. When you calculate the massive amount of physical energy required to chop wood, gather kindling, and maintain a raging fire, against the relatively modest calorie boost you get from cooking a single meal, the math doesn't immediately favor cooking as the absolute first use. Smoking a massive carcass, on the other hand, could preserve tens of thousands of calories worth of meat for weeks. That is a massive immediate payoff for the effort of building a fire. But regardless of which side of that debate is right, both sides agree on the bigger picture. Fire mattered immensely, and it mattered incredibly early in our timeline. The disagreement isn't about whether fire changed everything. It's just a debate about exactly which application of fire tipped the evolutionary scale first. What is absolutely not up for debate is the final outcome. Once fire entered the picture, whether they used it primarily for cooking, smoking, staying warm through the cold nights, or warding off predators in the dark, there was no going back to being just another ape in the trees. We became a species that required cooked food. If you tried to survive on raw, unrefined wild food today, you would struggle to maintain your weight. We are completely biologically dependent on the external, pre-digestion process of cooking. So the next time you sit down at a table, cut into a hot meal, and eat it without thinking twice about the fact that it has been exposed to extreme heat, it is worth pausing to remember what that convenience actually represents. 2 million years ago, that simple act, food chemically broken down by the heat of a flame before it ever touched your teeth, was the exact dividing line in history. It was the absolute difference between a creature with a massive gut and a tiny brain, and the modern human being you are today. Fire didn't just change what our ancient ancestors ate. It completely changed how much time they had to think, where they could safely close their eyes at night, how they gathered in the dark, and ultimately, it built the very mind you are using right now to listen to this story.